Hey, what's up everybody? This is Mike. Welcome back to another video. I hope you're doing well. And recently I realized something. I've been an owner of the Mavic Mini for more than 2 weeks now, and I haven't taken a single photo with that drone, which is really weird because I love taking photos on my Mavic 2 Pro, but I've been really focusing too much, I would say, on the video capabilities of the Mavic Mini. So today I'm going to change that, and I'm going to compare the Mavic 2 Pro to the Mavic Mini. I know it's not really fair as they are very different from each other in very different price points, but this is what I have right now, and obviously the Mavic 2 Pro is capable of taking RAW photos and the Mavic Mini isn't. So today we'll find out if that is a real deal breaker for me or not. Also for you guys, I think this is going to show if you can really count on the Mavic Mini for everyday photos that you can share on Instagram with your friends and family, or JPEG is just not good enough. So I really don't know what to expect, so I am very open to all sorts of outcomes. So I'm going to compare the Mavic 2 Pro to the Mavic Mini. Let's check it out. So let's start with the DJI Mavic Mini first. As you can see, I am currently positioning the drone so I can shoot this pier from different angles. And the good thing is that in photo mode you can adjust your manual settings for the camera. In video mode you cannot do that, but in photo mode luckily you are able to change your settings. So I went from automatic settings to manual, of course, and I'm using ISO 100. And the shutter speed, I'm going to change it depending on the lighting conditions and of course depending on the composition as well. So currently I'm using a shutter speed of 1/800th of a second, and it looks fine. Some parts of the sand on the beach look a bit overexposed and some of the rocks are a bit too white, but ideally, we will be able to change that, or at least fine-tune it a little bit in post. So I'm currently just moving the drone around, trying to figure out a good composition for this pier. And I also decided to make a little panorama. So I'm starting from the bottom and I'm moving the camera up. And as you can see, I'm also changing the settings so the exposure is good enough. And I don't really have a specific idea in mind. As you can see, I'm just cruising around trying to find a good angle. This specific pier has a bit unnatural shape. It looks a bit like a T, but also it's a bit hard to get it all in the frame. So it really depends how you want to compose your shot. But here I am doing this bird's eye view shot straight down, and I'm using a shutter speed of 1/320. Again, slightly underexposing the whole image so I can see more details in post and I can lift up the shadows a little bit. It's better to have a underexposed image rather than an overexposed image. So I'm just going to figure out different angles and see what works best for me, and after that I'm going to try to replicate the same procedure with the Mavic 2 Pro so we can see the differences in post. Now let's switch to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, and let me tell you, after flying with the Mavic Mini for the past couple of weeks, I felt like I'm flying a brand new drone switching back to the Mavic 2 Pro. It felt, of course, so much faster, so much more fluid and smooth and responsive. But of course that makes sense. The drone is so much more expensive and it has so many more capabilities compared to the Mavic Mini. But let's see what it can do. As you can see, I'm starting to replicate the same shots, or at least trying to. Keep in mind, I'm not using any filters on any of the two drones to make it more fair. Of course, if you are using ND filters, the results would be slightly different, but generally I try not to use ND filters for my photos anyway. So I decided to set the aperture on the Mavic 2 Pro to f2.8 just to make it fair, because the aperture of the Mavic Mini is fixed and it's also set at f2.8. So I didn't want to play with the aperture on the Mavic 2 Pro. I wanted to make it as fair as possible, so I set my white balance to auto. That doesn't really matter when you're shooting raw photos anyway. You can always change it. And again, I'm using very similar settings, ISO 100 and shutter speed something between 1 800 of a second and 1000 of a second, so it's very close to the settings that we used on the Mavic Mini. But yeah, those are the shots that I took with the Mavic Mini and the Mavic 2 Pro. This is how I generally go about when taking photos. I'm trying to find the good angle and I'm experimenting with the settings so it looks well exposed. And now it's time to switch to Lightroom so I can show you how the photos look like. So let's start with the Mavic Mini photos. Here I'm going to quickly go through all of them one by one. And this is the beginning of my manual panorama. As you can see, I'm going up and up and up until I go all the way up. So now I can easily stitch those photos into one panorama. These are my top-down shots. This one is the same but a bit higher, different angle. Once again, and that's it for the Mavic Mini. Now looking at the same shots but with the Mavic 2 Pro, you can see that they are pretty much too overexposed, which is a bit weird because when I was taking those shots it didn't look that overexposed. But of course that's not a problem at all because we are using raw files, and that allows us to very easily change the exposure. As you can see, those are the same manual panorama shots. We can stitch them quite easily into one panorama. And this is the same top down as the one with the Mavic Mini, and we'll compare them in just a second. Different angle once again. And yeah, I was just playing with different angles with the Mavic Mini as well. But let's compare those images because they look pretty identical. Yeah, this on the left here is the Mavic Mini and this is the Mavic 2 Pro on the right. So as soon as you start comparing them, you will immediately notice that the water here, the details in the water are brighter. The general area here in the photo where we have lots of white in the rocks and the pier is also a bit too overexposed, and we don't have that issue on the Mavic 2 Pro. So just like any other time, the Mavic Mini's results are a bit too overexposed. Maybe that's my bad for not exposing the image properly, but when I was taking the photo it looked alright, to be honest. But let's zoom in a bit on the rocks, for example. And as usual, we can see that the image on the Mavic Mini is a bit too sharp. The rocks have this over sharpened effect, which we don't see here in the Mavic 2 Pro. But generally the difference is not that huge if you ask me. Yes, we have some overexposure here in the rocks and in the pier, but looking at them side by side, the difference is not that massive. So let's compare these two images, for example. They are not exactly the same angle, but I did try my best to frame them very close one to another. And immediately we see difference in the color of the water. When we zoom in, we have the same problem on the Mavic Mini. The rocks are a bit too sharp as well as the water. Let's zoom on the sand because I think this makes a little bit more difference. The color of the sand is definitely very different on both images, and also the water is it's a bit pixelated here, I would say, compared to the Mavic 2 Pro, which is better looking for sure. But the color of the water, as you can see, is also quite different. But in general, if you're not comparing them one to another, I would say that this one is not bad at all, and I wouldn't really mind to use it if it was in RAW format. Now, as it's in JPEG, we don't really have that many options to edit this photo, but we can still use it, of course. The main difference is, of course, JPEG versus RAW, but in terms of colors, yes, we are quite used to this from watching the footage that comes from the Spark, for example. A bit too sharp, a bit too saturated, and I think they are just very, very similar. So now let's get back to the Mavic Mini, as that's what we are mostly interested in. We have this conclusion that the images are not bad at all, I would say, but let's see how well we can actually make this manual panorama from these images that I made. And let me just quickly merge them into a panorama. So here we have the finished result, and it was quite quick to stitch them. Keep in mind, every photo of the Mavic Mini is about 6 megabytes, and the ones from the Mavic 2 Pro are about 42, if I'm not mistaken. So quite a big difference in terms of size. But as you can see, now we can easily use the right aspect ratio, for example, for Instagram, and we can just frame our panorama so it works well for us. Using the rule of thirds, I can just position the pier in the bottom part of the image, keep the sky on top, and use it like this. It's not ideal, but it's not really ideal. I'm not completely happy with how this panorama turned out, to be honest, but seeing how the process works might be useful for some of you guys. And let me just quickly edit this image because I got really intrigued by this T-shape photo, the top-down shot, and I just want to see if I can get rid of this overexposure warning that I have here in this upper right corner. As you can see, when I hover on top of this arrow, I can see here on some parts of the rocks we have red color on top, which shows that these parts are overexposed. So we can lower the highlights, not too much, we don't want it to be like this, but lower the highlights like so, lift the shadows a bit, and let me just quickly try to edit this photo so I can see how much I can actually push it. So this took me 2 minutes to do, and let's see before and after. And yeah, as you know, I like changing the color of the water because this one is too green. I like to make it a bit more bluish, and generally please pay attention to the rocks here and also the pier. Before editing they were quite bright and a bit too overexposed, but now after editing the photo just a little bit, they are a lot better looking. Let me just lower the highlights just a bit more. Generally, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. I'm actually quite happy with what you can do on the Mavic Mini. I can actually try to edit this photo, for example, and I'll frame it for Instagram 4x5. Let me just do that very quickly. Keep the pier in the middle. And there you go. This is my very quick edit on the image. I edited this in a couple of minutes. And this is the before, this is the after. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of the teal and orange look. So this is what I went for. But I have to say I'm really pleasantly surprised with the quality of the photo, because I wouldn't really mind posting this on my Instagram. It looks good, it looks sharp, yes. You definitely don't need to add any sharpening to those images, otherwise they will be just super sharp. I'm actually quite okay with how this photo looks like, and the quality of the photo itself is good enough. So if you don't have a Mavic 2 Pro or something expensive to shoot with, I wouldn't really say it's a deal breaker for sure, because the Mavic Mini is definitely a very capable machine. Of course, if I have the choice, I would always prefer to use my Mavic 2 Pro for taking those photos. But if I am in a situation where I only have access to the Mavic Mini, I definitely wouldn't feel bad about using it and taking a few photos with it. So with that being said, I hope this video was useful and interesting for you, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please smash that like button and subscribe for more drone related content. And this is Mike from Drone Supremacy. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.